Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. Woo! Yay! I was I as I explained last Tuesday, I got a new computer because my other computer crashed and you forget all the little things that you do to set up to get everything working. All right, so I have let me get my slide. Hold on. One more second. Okay. All right. So making sure you're in the right place. We are here for Practical Neurobiology Orgasms. I am Wendy. I am an orgasm coach, and I am happy to have you guys here so you can learn all about how orgasms work and all that beautiful stuff. All right. I do have to kind of keep an eye on the Zoom. Let me move my man. Like everything is better, but at the same time, not. It's kind of crazy. Okay. All right. All right. Welcome to today. We are going to be going over a few different things here. Um, in particular, the one big thing that I will be covering is the differences between male and female orgasms. For the most part, things are the same, but there are some key differences, which I think cause a lot of issues in people's sex lives, in particular in female bodied individuals' sex lives. So we're going to go through that. We'll also go through a bunch of the different kind of orgasms you can have. And throughout this, we'll kind of explain about like what happens like with orgasms, what you should like how to have them or not how to have them, what kinds you should be having, how frequently, and then in particular, one of the big things is like how stress and trauma impact our ability to experience pleasure, either ourselves or our partners. And then along the way, you'll learn about all the many, many, many benefits of orgasm. Let me make sure I am recording. Yes, recording. Okay. um, I'm just laughing at all of this. It's been an interesting week. All right, so I'm going to start with the basics of what, like, kind of the foundation of orgasm speak when I go through this um, class today. So, this is the basic explanation of what happens in a the orgasm process, right? So we are aroused, we go through excitement, and then we go through plateau. Like there's a plateau stage, there's an orgasm resolution. When looking at all of the research, this is the basic thing. Like if you ever hear someone talk, like read a research study and they're talking about plateau or excitement or arousal, this is what they're talking about specifically is like this kind of biological processes that happen. And so I will use the same terminology just to make sure everything is clear. But there are some things when talking about orgasm, the most of the research assumes that arousal is already there. And in my experience as an orgasm coach, a lot of the issues actually come before that with libido. And I will get into that a little bit, but it is a little bit more complicated. But I will touch on some of that so you'll kind of get an understanding of what's going on and why it actually is a little bit complicated. The one thing about this sexual response cycle that is talked about all the time is that it is pretty consistent for males, but it is not the same for females. In fact, this is more what the sexual response cycle looks like. These are just three of many different variations of what can happen. For example, if you're going to be having multiple orgasms, this is more what it looks like. This is what it looks like when you do get excited and get really close to orgasming, but you never kind of orgasm. You can also kind of, your excitement phase may go all over the place and you may kind of skip a plateau and then hit orgasm. So this is where the complications arise because most of the research is going off of the thought that excitement plateau and orgasm and resolution happen in a uniform way. So also like kind of getting into the whole concept, right, of arousal, the the excitement, like biologically, once you get to a certain point, and you get into that orgasm like cycle part, it does follow that general curve, obviously orgasm is not guaranteed, but the excitement and the plateau do kind of happen. But it is that process of getting to there where there's a lot of confusion. And so there is this concept of the dual control model of sexual response. It was developed by the Kinsey Institute. If you've ever read the book Come As You Are, Dr. Emily Nagasaki, who studied at the Kinsey Institute, talks about this, and she really does break it down pretty well, and not pretty well, she breaks it down like amazing actually. And her book is really awesome, and I think it's really beneficial for a lot of people. There are a few things, like everyone has their difference of opinion and different stuff. And so I read her book, after I had done all of my research. Like, so I'd done like a couple years of research to really understand like what was happening through the orgasm process before I read her book, because I didn't want to I actually didn't read a lot of books for like a lot of years. I just literally went off of the science and the research, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting influenced by other people's interpretation of the data. And I wanted to come up with my own. But a lot of her research, I mean, like what she talks about, but really does coincide with a lot of stuff that I came up with too. But the one thing that's interesting about the sexual response cycle, the dual control model of sexual response, is that it is based off a questionnaire. So it is based off of what other people perceive. Now, with a large enough sample, and they have a huge sample, you would hope that it is, pretty accurate at that point. But the thing is that, not everyone actually does have an accurate representation of what is going on in their body. And this is where I think neurobiology actually plays a really important role in it, is because we can perceive things a certain way, but it doesn't mean we actually are perceiving things in the correct way that's happening in your body. But there are, like, biologically, physically, there are things that are happening, and then it's kind of the meaning that we put on it. And so this model of sexual response, I think, does a really great job, but it still has some limitations within it, because it is based on the psychological model versus a true neurobiological model. So just as a thing, like orgasms as sexual response, they begin and end in the brain. So no matter how you break it down, it is all a process that starts and ends there first. And the nervous system really is the key to understanding orgasms, not necessarily what's going on in your mind. And I do want to mention, as I go through this, I'm going to be talking a lot about the different parts of the brain. You do not have to remember all of them. There's no quiz. You're not going to be graded on anything. It's just the map, so to speak, of how orgasms happen. And so when I talk about some area being like turned on or an area being turned off, it's never an absolute. So like your brain is always working, all the areas work together, but we're just talking specifically about like different areas as it relates to like the orgasm process. So a lot of things will still be like on, because your body is still functioning and doing alive, right? Or being alive. So just know that I'm not saying like areas are completely turned off or completely turned on. It's just like there's heightened activity in these areas. It's just a lot easier to say turned on instead of heightened activity, right? Or turned down or turned off, right? So just want to clarify that as I go through this presentation, so that way you're not like, left with a misunderstanding of how I'm using my words, because I think words are really important. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to explain these different models, is because when you hear about them, you may or may not understand like where that goes, because like arousal in particular is kind of like is the libido, and it's really, as I said at the beginning, it's assumed when most of the research is talking about orgasm, it's assumed that your libido is there and that you are already aroused. And so that actually it gets me here to getting to that point, right? Hold on one sec. Let me make sure I have this right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So libido, for the most part, is driven by dopamine, and it is driven by your hormones. So without those functioning properly, you're going to have issues with your libido. You're going to have issues going from, like, you may mentally desire to be turned on, to be excited, to be able to have an orgasm, but your arousal phase will be, impacted by what is going on in your biology, right? So that dual response cycle, like with the Kinsey Institute. Oh yeah, I just realized I didn't explain that well. All right. So the concept of this is that there is like, you'll get excited and then things will happen that will like inhibit. So like putting your foot on the gas pedal and then putting your foot on the brake. And you kind of keep going with this like gas pedal and brake, gas pedal, brake, gas pedal, brake, until eventually there's more gas than there is brake pedal. And once you get to that point, that's called the tipping point, then you can get into orgasm and resolution. And if you go back and look, at this, it is that for a lot of people. Like, I'm sure everyone here has probably had that, hopefully has had that experience of having, getting excited, but it happens sometimes where something will happen. Maybe your feet are cold, or there's a noise, or someone walks in, like whatever. You're, you kind of like, there's like the brake pedal gets put on there, or maybe a thought comes up in your head. And so like, there's a brake pedal. So that is part of the process of excitement. And so in general, this has a tendency to look more like what happens in a female orgasm, where it's that like the go start, go start, go start in our mind. And it's not a steady incline until we get there. And then, depending on when you get to that plateau part, if you're still having that gas pedal, brake pedal, gas pedal, brake pedal, it will be harder to get out of that plateau because you're kind of like have that brake pedal that's happening, right? But if you're lucky enough where you don't have the things going on, then you'll be able to get to orgasm quicker. All right. So now going back over here. So this kind of leads me into stress. So if you attended the session on Thursday when I talked about a lot about stress, like we learned a lot about like how stress impacts like your hormones, and um, the whole process really does put everything, like your entire sex hormone production, it puts it on hold. And so most people live in a lot of stress. Like, I don't know a single person who isn't stressed out anymore. And so that does really impact people's ability to get into the arousal phase. And it impacts your ability to maintain that excitement phase, because dopamine is the driving factor. And when you are stressed, and whether that stress is like physical or perceived, it impacts your ability to make dopamine, and it also impacts your ability to make your other sex hormones, because those sex hormones are made in the adrenal glands, but the adrenal glands are also responsible for the cortisol. So, but let's just assume that you're pretty stressed. You're like living a pretty unstressed life, or you got really good um, breathing exercises to help reduce your stress, like what I taught about. And now you've got that arousal, your libido is high, and now you're wanting to get into, you know, being able to have an orgasm. So now it kind of comes into the whole erotic stimuli, like what is actually stimulating your body, like your neural, like the whole way everything is working in order for you to be able to orgasm. And this is really where I think the biggest issues come in understanding, in particular, female orgasms. And we're going to start with male orgasms because it's actually a pretty simple path. It's basically these two sections of the brain, the parietal lobe and the occipital lobe. And the parietal lobe is for object recognition, and the occipital lobe is for visual processing. So if you think about the way society is set up, in order for like what is, like movies and porn and, sexy lingerie, like all the things that for the most part we think about like getting into the mood, they're really geared towards the way male brains get aroused. And I do want to mention, for as I said, for the most part, like orgasms, though that process is more or less the same, what happens in the brain once you get to that that point of orgasm, there's not much difference between male and female. It is in this arousal phase that it is very different. And as you guys know, you have to get through this arousal phase before you can even get to excitement. So this is where that whole all of it comes into play. Because when it comes to a female brain, these are the areas that are really important for arousal. And as you can see, they're very different from the male arousal pathway. Now, as I mentioned before, it's not an all or nothing thing. This is just these pathways have to be activated in order for a female to continue on into the excitement phase. The only pathways that have to be activated for the male are those other two, which is the parietal lobe and the occipital lobe. And the thing is, for a female, those are also being activated, while you're getting through the arousal. It's just we have these other areas that happen as well. And so one of the big areas is the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, and this connects the left and the right brain together. So basically, everything that is happening in your body is getting processed, and it has there's an awareness of everything in order to get through arousal. So that means everything that's going on in your environment, your proprioception, where you are, where your body is in space, your interoception, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're sensing in your body, like is it cold, is it hot, and then the other area that's kind of crazy, but also makes sense, is facial recognition. So the area of the brain that it's the corpus callosum that activates facial recognition is highly activated when you're aroused. And then also the insula, which is part of your basic survival needs. So guys, males, they kind of have it easy. They have this really direct pathway towards getting to excitement, but around females have all of this other stuff that is going on that has to kind of be taken care of. And so uh let's say I feel like I missed. Oh no, yeah, we're good. So anyways, in particular right here, no, I think this is where I switched. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I had to, yeah. There is, I'm switching over to the different, different presentation. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I guess it was the same. All right. I switched it up at the last minute and then I couldn't get everything working right. And I do apologize for that. All right. So once you kind of get through all of this, right? Once we get into what is um the from arousal to excitement. So first you have the libido to want to be able to get aroused. And then once you go through the arousal, then you're going to get into excitement, which is that first phase of that sexual response that you'll see in all of the research. And so what's happening during this kind of transition period is that the prefrontal cortex is getting completely turned on, remember, it's always working all the time. It's getting turned on. And then also the limbic system is really in high alert, what's going on right here. And this is all really a good thing because we want our prefrontal cortex to be activated because we want to make sure that it's appropriate time and place to take action on our arousal. For example, if someone sees a really sexy person in the grocery store, that's probably not the time and place to really start going at it, right? We want to, there's a level of appropriateness that the prefrontal cortex helps us do. It helps us make sure that it's the right time and place. And then the limbic system is going to be on activated because if say you're having sex out in nature, your limbic system is still going to be paying attention, is there a predator that's coming up behind us while we're being getting it on, right? So we do want to have the limbic system activated so we can keep constantly being on alert to make sure that we are safe, right? And so the other thing that's kind of cool is the hippocampus and the fusiform are also get activated in there too, so we can recall our memories. Good thing, right? Hey, what was that technique I used with my partner that worked really well, right? We want to be able to access those memories so that way we can have the skills, to keep being better lovers. So like it's all a really good thing. Um, However, we have something that happens with females that doesn't happen with males. In the males, only the left side of the amygdala is activated, and that's language and communication. So, like, that's a good thing. Like, hey, baby, does that feel good? Want to be able to say things like that, right? Like, should I move to the right? Should I move to the left? Those are good things, right? But when it comes to females, the right side of the amygdala also gets like heightened activation. And this is the part that stores emotionally meaningful memories and stimuli. And this is like the area of like your subconscious and unconscious part of your brain comes up. And the, like there's some like theories out there as to why this occurs. To me, it makes sense. For the most part, females are the physically weaker of the two, like between males and females, in a lot of the species, in particular the primates. And, if we know that the areas of the brain that are activated are like all that basic needs and survival needs, like if it is a situation where it's dangerous for us, we want to be able to get, like, it would make sense that the females that have the biology to get themselves out of dangerous situations survived, right? Because like the ones who couldn't get out of the dangerous situations probably didn't survive. So we have this heightened ability to stop our arousal and stop like what's happening and like completely switch out of it. Whereas guys actually don't have that. Like they don't have those same parts of the brain that are flowing through to be able to switch off so quickly and easily. And part of this, what that happens during females during the switch, is that we get this huge burst of cortisol, yes, the stress hormone, and we also get noradrenaline, so that way our muscles get activated so we can get ourselves out of there. Because as I mentioned before in the other class, cortisol, like stress is not inherently a bad thing. Stress plays a really important function in our body. And so cortisol is really good. Like it serves its purpose. It's just when you have too much of anything or too little of anything, that's when issues happen in your body, just in general, right? So cortisol can help us like think more clearly and quickly and help us get out of stressful situations, right? So this is what's going on there as far as the biology part of it. And then the other thing that's also happening is that it's really clear that the research shows that memories are not just stored in the brain. Like the memory recall part is part of the brain, but there's this thing that happens at night when we go to sleep, when the activities of the day get processed. There is an emotional state, which is like what's happening in your body, and like a mental, I call them like a body snapshot and a mental snapshot, and they get paired together and then they get stored. And then when memories are recalled, both parts are stored. So like the body snapshot and the mental snapshot are stored. So the body is like your emotions, like were you sad, were you angry, where is there excitability, like all these different emotional states. And then the memory snapshot are like your feelings, what you thought, what you felt about the situation, like the more the mind, right? And so those get paired together. And when you go from that arousal to excitement with the amygdala, the subconscious part is going to be having there's a lot of activity that's going on in your brain right there. And it's actually going through those subconscious memories. So they may not be at the surface. So, there's all kinds of scenarios that can happen with a partner where they're activating some of these subconscious memories. Because remember, like those different, like one of the examples I like to use, I think it's pretty easy to like, you know, kind of grasp the totality of what's happening, is like, say your partner makes the face that the bully in sixth grade made. Subconsciously, you are not like aware of that, but your body and your mind and your brain and your whole physical being has stored that. And so your partner could be making that face, whatever it was, and subconsciously you're now kind of getting, your brain, your body is like, wait, we need to like make sure that we're safe right now, because your experiences from the past with that sixth grade bully were not good. So that facial expression, because remember, we're interpreting facial expressions, is now saying, wait, we got to slow down a little bit. So remember that whole gas pedal, brake pedal is going on. And this is why just knowing that that happens with you, I think is really important to understand, because the way to get out of that is actually to be embodied and be mindful and be present. So I do want to mention, just because it happens doesn't mean like you're stuck there. It is about developing those practices and skills that are going to help you de-stress, get present in your body. So that way that whole gas pedal, brake pedal doesn't happen as frequently for you. You can stay present and you can move from that arousal to excitement phase and go through that excitement phase more easily without that whole stop, start that is very typical of females. Um, so yeah, so now let's just assume, like, now we're talking both male and female here, and this is like, in general, this is like foreplay, right? Like that, the foreplay phase. Um, a whole bunch of things, are activated. The limbic system, once your brain, like your limbic system has already figured out that you're safe, it's going to get kind of, the volume's going to be turned down a little bit. It's not turned off all the way, because you always got to be aware of your surroundings, but it does start to turn down. So as long as you start having that, you feel safe and your pathways are all clear, then you're going to keep moving on through that excitement, and your reward system is going to be activated. And so your body's going to be producing some dopamine, being like, yes, we like this. This is go. Let's keep repeating this. Your orbital frontal cortex, your OFC, this gets activated now. So it's that self-awareness. So first we have that PFC, which is part of like the appropriateness. It uses our skills and our uh, executive functioning. And then you also have the OFC, which is also part of this area with some more executive functioning there. But the self-awareness is really the big key thing that comes on here. And this is like that whole mindfulness. Like once you learn how to like really shift into that awareness and that mindfulness, then that excitement phase is a lot easier for your whole biology to process through there. When you are not in that mindfulness, the OFC gets turned down and your limbic system gets turned up, right? And so that's where the whole brake pedal, gas pedal. I just want to make sure we're still good. I realized I forgot to check the chat and make sure no one's trying to come in. And so then there's also some increases in a whole bunch of neurotransmitters here. So we have acetylcholine. Acetylcholine helps us learn things, but it's also responsible for erections, both of the clitoris and of the penis. And then we have glutamate, which helps like energy, right? Because you want to have energy to be able to have sex, norepinephrine to help your muscles, stamina, and then a nitric oxide to increase blood flow. And then I want to mention, when it comes to nitric oxide in particular, it's really important for your body to have enough testosterone and estrogen in order for that nitric oxide process to occur. So if you, in males and females, so males testosterone and females estrogen. And I talked about it a little bit on Tuesday, where there's different forms of estrogen that the body uses. And so we don't want the estradiol, which is what is processed when we're stressed. We want the first phase of the estrogen. So if you're too stressed, then or going underneath a lot of stress, you're going to have that other form of estrogen, and it is not the form of estrogen that will help with the juiciness of the vulva and all of the parts. All right. So let's just say that we got through the arousal and the excitement, and now we're moving into that plateau. Our heart rate is going to be like increased, your breath is going to be quicker, your nipples harden. And this is the part that a lot of people don't realize, is that this whole process from that arousal to excitement plateau is about 20 minutes for both males and females. And I think there's a lot of confusion, because it appears that males may orgasm quicker, but it's really not. It has to do with the way that males get excited. I'm going to use a typical cisgender example, because it's easier for me to explain it. and I think most people have experienced or at least seen this and somewhere in their life. And so let's take a mother and father, like a male father and a female mother, and they are like the mom is putting the kids to bed and they know they're going to go have sex. Well, during that time, the dad is probably sitting there thinking about, oh yeah, I wonder if she's going to wear that outfit. Well, he's already starting to like imagine what's going on. He's already activated his parietal lobe and occipital lobe through that imagination process. Because what's cool about the brain, whether it's imaginary or physical, like in your imagination or actually happening, it's the same areas of your brain that are activated. So if you're imagining visual, like seeing someone, your occipital lobe and parietal lobe are actually being activated at that moment of imagination. And so he's already starting his arousal pathway and process, right? But the mom isn't anywhere near close to being able to, start that because she's, putting the kids to bed. So then she walks in the room. She's still not there yet because remember, those arousal pathways are like what's going on in the environment, dropping down into her body, the proprioception and interoception, being aware of what is happening in her body. As she's walking in, he's still continuing through that arousal process, but she's nowhere near there. So it's that 20 minutes, most of the time, the males have a jump start on the females when it comes to that process. So it feels like the males are going through it a lot quicker, but in reality, the females just haven't started their process. And then, of course, there are the males who maybe have a hard time, being able to orgasm quickly and it takes them forever, but those are actually different issues, and they're usually more related to what's going on hormonally and like the stress and the neurotransmitters than it has to do with the actual physical process of arousal and excitement. All right, if you guys have any questions, feel free to please drop them in the chat because I am trying to keep my eye on that as well. All right, so let's look at what is going on, all the different parts. So when I mention something, you guys know what I'm talking about. This is the, God, I thought these were labeled here. They're not, but they're basically the clitoris and the head are kind of like are the same thing of the penis. You have the scrotum, which is the same as the bulbs of yeah, here we go. This will make it a little bit easier. So we have the bulbs, the scrotum, the eggs, right? The root of uh the oh my gosh. Let me start at the top. All right, we have the leg, like the legs to the tip, right? Um, and then we have on the females, it's also the legs. Like these parts are all the same. So like the very tip of this and very tip of that. And they're actually just like there's a little corpus spongiosum right here. There's actually a little bit here too on the clitoris as well. I thought I made a really awesome, amazing clitoral diagram, and it's on my computer that crashed, and I forgot to back it up. And I'm really bummed about it. I was trying really hard to get this into the presentation. So, uh, tech stuff. Anyway, so they're pretty much the same as far as like the structurally, they're going to be the same as far as the clitoris and penis. When it comes to the outside parts, everything, the male and the female, there is a part that corresponds with it. And so I will be getting a little bit clearer on what all of those are, but I did want to point out them. So like we have the same things. We both have bladders, we have a penis and a clitoris, there's the testes and the ovaries, you have the vas deferens for the penis, and you have the fallopian tubes for a female, and then you have the bulbourethral glands and the Bartholin glands. This is the part that puts out the little wet, secretes the wet stuff at the beginning. And you have the female prostate and the male prostate, and you have the perineum and the anus. So, all right. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the overview of the nervous system. So that way, when I use these words in this next little part right here, then you will understand everything about it. or at least have a good understanding of what I'm talking about. So we have the central nervous system, and this is the brain and everything that's inside the spinal cord. And then we have everything else, which is in the peripheral. And then we have the autonomic, which is like the automatic stuff. This is mostly internal communication. It's for the most part, the autonomic nervous system is sending signals from the body up into the central nervous system. And then same with the somatic. For the most part, there's more going from the body up into the central nervous system. But of course, there is directions that are coming back down again too. So it's difference between afferent and afferent, if you ever come across that when you're doing research. But so you have the sympathetic, which is basically gas pedal, and parasympathetic, which is brake pedal. And this happens in everything. There's all pretty much every part of our body has parasympathetic and sympathetic going to it, because just like with our heart, it pumps, goes in, goes out, our lungs go in, go out, our blood, like everything has an in out, like we're able to move our arms in, out, like all of the stuff. There's always a sympathetic and a sympathetic sympathetic and parasympathetic response to that. And then for the somatic part, which is like our feeling and sensing, we've got the sensory and the movement. And all of this plays a really important part in orgasms. So now let's go back over to anatomy, thinking about excitement. In males, we have the bulbourethral gland, also known as the cowpers. I usually just say cowpers, so I don't have to say that word. And it releases fluid through the oh my God, I can't think of the tube. Oh my God, sorry, that was funny. And that actually like clears it out to get rid of any sperm, any urine that was inside of there, and prepares it to be able to have the sperm go through. The penis begins to swell and becomes partially or fully erect, and then the testicles begin to draw up towards the perineum. And then on the female, it's the same process. The Bartholin's gland releases fluid. The clitoris begins to swell and becomes partially or fully erect. And instead of the testicles getting drawn up, the uterus starts to draw up and starts changing the position of the cervix. And through the process of excitement, the cervix and the vagina actually lengthen, and they can lengthen quite a bit. So depending on the female, it can accommodate, certain females can accommodate really, really, really large sizes when they are excited. And so that kind of gets us to the nerves, because remember how orgasms like all start and end in the brain, and that is through the nerves. So like information comes from the body to the brain, and but first, like, you have to be excited, you have to have the right hormones and neurotransmitters going on around there and the right stimuli in order to start the orgasm process, sending signals down to the body so the body can respond, and then the body taking in information and sending signals back up to the brain, and this wonderful, lovely flow of information going to and from the body to the brain, right? And so probably the most talked about orgasms deal with the pudendal nerve. And this is the pudendal nerve is attached to the clitoris and the penis. But there's other areas besides just the clitoris and penis. It's also part of the inner thigh. The pudendal nerve splits out and becomes like the perineal nerve too, which is the perineum, which, in case you guys don't know, the perineum is the area from like the base of the penis to the anus, and from the vagina to the anus. So that's the perineum there. And then the deep perineal, which is like from the root of the penis and the deep vagina, the pudendal nerve is in there, and then also inside of the anus as well. That's the sensory part of it, right? And so the motor part of it, this is the middle of the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor is this like really cool structure. It's like a hammock. It's got muscles going this way, muscles going that way. It's like this really cool thing. It's the structure that basically holds like supports all of our internal organs. Like like all of it is supported through our pelvic floor. Obviously, like not just like the bladder and like the parts that are down in your um, sacral area, but like literally even your lungs, your digestion, all of it is supported through this pelvic floor. So like without a strong pelvic floor, everything starts to shift. So it's a really important muscle and structure of the human body, and it is often stressed and overworked. And then also the pudendal nerve is also connected to the bladder. And then we have, I thought I had one before that. Then we have the vagus nerve. So vagus nerve is talked about a lot. And so I want to make sure that people know what it is. It actually goes all the way from your brain, like the back of your head, all the way down to your rectum. And it's got all these different branches that go out. And this is the automatic system. So like your automatic nervous system is controlled through the vagus nerve. There's a couple parts of the automatic system that are controlled with some of the nerves but they're all in like your face, like face and head. But anything that's from your neck and below is all controlled through this vagus nerve. And so it is connected to some of our sex organs that can help us experience orgasms. And that includes the prostate in males and the cervix in uterus and in females. So one of the things that is important to know, like if you're comparing male and female orgasms, a lot of people have heard of like, prostate orgasm for males. And the prostate, there's this like component of the prostate. I just forgot the word for it. Begins with a U. I'll look it up. I can't remember, but it's part of the prostate. That's all I remember at this moment. Is the same their cervix, the cervix and that part of the prostate are the same structure. And so they have the same nerves going there. And so a prostate orgasm and a cervical orgasm are actually kind of one and the same as far as like what's going on biologically there. So just like a male can have a prostate orgasm, a female can have a cervical orgasm. So even though there's some doctors who and specialists and therapists and stuff that say no, all the orgasms are just the pudendal nerve, but it's not accurate when you really go deep into the science of it, because the vagus nerve, just like a prostate orgasm, is not stimulating the pudendal nerve. It's stimulating the vagus nerve and it's stimulating the cervix. So that's the vagus nerve. And then also nipple orgasms, those are actually a product of the vagus nerve as well. And one of the things that we do know is that people who have spinal cord injuries, in particular females that have spinal cord injuries, there's a lot of them are still able to have orgasms, and they have said that they feel very similar to when they were having penetrative orgasms. And that's because they were the cervical orgasms that they were having. And because they're still able to stimulate the vagus nerve, they're able to have that same kind of orgasm, even with a spinal cord injury. And a really, really other cool thing about the vagus nerve, because remember, it does all of the autonomic nervous system, which is all the automatic things. There are these nerve clusters along the vagus nerve that correspond with all of the chakras. So there's a throat chakra and a heart chakra. So if you've heard of, some people have had throat orgasms before, that's vagus nerve stimulation. Nipple orgasm, that's the heart chakra. There is the solar plexus, and I have personally given females these orgasms before, and they're like, what the heck is that? And so that's actually a vagus nerve, vagal nerve orgasm that can be happen through the solar plexus chakra. And then you have the sacral chakra, which is, all the other stuff, and the root chakra too, which is like the anus, right? So it makes sense why the vagus nerve. So like the cervix would be like the sacral chakra, and then the anal orgasms are through the root chakra. All right. So, and then that takes us to this little nerve right here. It's a big nerve. A lot of these are big nerves. The pelvic splenic nerve. This is connected to the bladder, the rectum. It's responsible for the erections in the penis and clitoris. It is also attached to the cervix. Once again, another nerve attached to the cervix. It also helps us move the pelvic floor, and it sends the information from the cervix and the bladder uh, to the brain, right? What's interesting is like when it comes to peeing, a lot of times people would think that peeing is a sympathetic because like gas pedal, like, yeah, you're peeing, but it's actually a parasympathetic. So if you think about the stress response, like if you're running away from a lion, you probably shouldn't be peeing or having to poop. So it's actually a relaxation, a response that goes with that whole part. I hate when my brain does that sometimes. I'm sorry. I probably need to have some coffee. Actually, let me take a sip for a second. All right. Am I overwhelming you guys with too much information, or is this all good? I hope you're all good. Um, but I find this all really interesting. Hopefully you guys do too. All right, now we have the hypogastric nerve. This is a really fun nerve for me, at least I think, because if you see here, it's sympathetic, parasympathetic, and somatic, and it is responsible for one of my favorite kinds of orgasms. So it is attached to the bladder. This is actually what helps us stop pee. It's also attached to the rectum, the prostate, the male and female. And if you guys know anything about squirting orgasms, this is the nerve that's responsible for squirting orgasms. So it is not the pudendal nerve that causes that. So squirting is a biomechanical process, and it has to do with stimulation of this nerve, the hypogastric nerve. And it is also attached to the perineum, the uterus, the cervix, the pelvic floor. And this is the nerve that is responsible for us being able to hold and stop her pee and let her pee out. But it's also the nerve responsible for squirting and not squirting as well. How you squirt and do all that is a process I go through. I have a maker come. I do go over that in there as well, if you're ever curious about that. And then, as you can see, how it's also a nerve responsible for ejaculation for both males and females. So this is the nerve that is responsible for male ejaculation as well as female. I think I said that 3 times. All right. Next, we have the iliolingual nerve, and this is on the skin of the upper thigh, the base of the penis, the front side of the scrotum, and the female's skin of mons pubis. Let me hold on. I realize I want to do something for you guys real quick. Um, I'm gonna see if I can switch this over on the screen because I have this other. Hold on 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right. So this is gonna kind of show you the outside of the vulva. So, we talked a little bit about the pudendal. Oh yeah, I haven't gotten into all of it. Let me go back over. Sorry, now I remember. It doesn't come there. Okay, so we have the iliolingual nerve. It's a somatic nerve, so it's sensory, right? And it's the skin of the mons pubis, like which is that front part, and the labia minora and the skin of the clitoral hood. Oh, I don't have all of them on the other thing. All right, so now we definitely got to go back over here. So there's even more nerves than what I used to have in my presentation. So part of this presentation is like my old presentation, because remember, computer crashing, things lost. I'm still very sad about it. Uh, but anyway, so this is you can see how many more nerves we have here. So we have the iliohypogastric, we have the um, uh, iliolingual right here, the genitofemoral, and the pudendal, the perineal, which is actually part of the pudendal, and then the inferior anal, which is actually a branch of the pudendal as well. But the genitofemoral, the iliolingual, and iliohypogastric, these are the iliohypogastric is attached to that hypogastric. So remember the one that does the squirting and ejaculation. But the iliolingual and genitofemoral, these are actually going through your thighs. Like these are actually what helps support and move your legs, like your leg motion and stuff. But there is this part that is connected over here. And the cool thing is like as you stimulate the vulva, and the outside of it, and not just focusing only on the clit and like the opening, you actually activate more nerves. And the thing is, anytime you activate more nerves, you get more sensation and you have a heightened, increased ability in order to be able to have someone orgasm. And so it is really important to know that there's like you want to do as much nerve activation as possible. All right, so now back over to this one again. All right. um, so now we've gotten through excitement and that plateau process. I didn't really explain kind of what it is. It's basically like that you're getting close. And so on the diagrams, it shows it to be really long, and it can be really long, but it can also be really short too. It's just that getting to that tipping point of going over into orgasm. So and then once you get into orgasm, like you're actually gonna have it, woo, yay, over 30 areas of the brain are activated. Like a whole bunch of stuff is going on at the point of orgasm, a whole bunch of information, sensory and motor information that is coming in. And I'm going to talk about these areas of the brain that are really important. Now, some of these areas get activated as you're going into that plateau. Um, but they're like really hyper at the point of orgasm. And these are like actually really cool areas. So we have the OFC, what's happening. So it's kind of makes sense. Do you remember how like this is the part that's about self-awareness, right? When you're with a partner, it actually is reduced. But when you're by yourself, it's increased. And that makes sense because if you're the one that's giving yourself the orgasm, you probably need to be pretty aware of what's going on. When you're with a partner, though, you can actually kind of like turn that area of your brain off. You know what I mean? Like you can really drop into the body sensation and not have to be quite as self-aware and have the other areas of your brain paying attention to everything. But then another really cool area that gets activated too is the PAG. This helps us regulate our heart and blood pressure. It does contractions, vocalizations. So being able to make sounds and all that stuff, that all comes from the PAG. Uh, there's a lot of females who and actually males too, like it's not unheard of for people not to be vocal, but in general when people are really paying attention to what's going on in their body, they're actually going to have some vocalizations. Now it may not look like porn because that's a whole different issue, but just like some moaning and stuff. The whole language though, and being able to speak and oh yeah, do that daddy, that actually is more of a skill and not so much of an inherent biological process. So people who practice speaking up and using their words while they are going through orgasm will find it easier. People who don't have that practice, as I said, it's just a skill, it might be difficult to actually speak and use their words during the time of plateau to orgasm. But vocalizations are actually a little bit different. This is actually like a physiological response of like air and sound that is coming through. And what's interesting, if you guys know this or not know this, your throat is connected to the cervix and also the prostate. So remember, everything's connected together. Your mouth is connected to your vagina and your penis. Your lips are connected to your clitoris and the head of the penis, right? So they're all like so I'm going to talk specifically about a female because remember one of the big things about this whole thing is that the different why female orgasms are very misunderstood. So in particular when it comes to the vocalizations, the cervix has to be um like ready in order for those vocalizations. Otherwise, it's just going to be a skill at that point. Those vocalizations and the cervix kind of go hand in hand together. And the PAG is actually partly responsible for part of this. But another cool thing that really is cool is the PAG, is that the PAG is an analgesic, meaning that it reduces pain. I'm going to be talking a lot about this in the BDSM and trauma class that I'm doing on Saturday. And yeah, because this plays like a really cool part in BDSM. So one of the cool areas of the brain that's activated. And then the angular gyrus right here. Remember I said there's 30 areas. So I just thought I'd mention these three because these are three parts that I think are cool and maybe not known or misunderstood. But this is the part of the brain where we have out of body experiences. So if you've ever had an orgasm where you just really felt like, oh my God, like that, like I felt like I was floating off, right? Like this is the area of the brain that gets activated in order to have that experience. Now, there's not like one size fits all for orgasm. Like, depending on which nerves are being activated will and how long and the frequency and all of that stuff, it's going to affect and change the different areas of the brain that are being activated. So you may not have that out of body experience, but you could have that out of body experience. And so, then that leads me to the actual orgasm itself. They're actually pretty short. Wish they were longer, right? Males average 10 to 20 seconds, but the female averages about 30 to 59. So females do have males beat when it comes to the length of the experience of an orgasm. And so I'm happy to be a female and being able to have longer orgasms. Um, so there's what also is happening in the body. There's a whole bunch of endorphins. So, if you ever gone running and like anytime you have like major intense exercise, which, sex in general is exercise, but an orgasm uses a lot of muscles there. There's going to be an endorphin release that helps pain relief. And it also enhances pleasure because the endorphins make you feel good. There's also two other neurotransmitters that get released. The best one is anandamide. This is the pleasure, the true pleasure neurotransmitter. Sometimes people talk about dopamine being the pleasure neurotransmitter. It is not. It is anandamide. Anandamide is part of the endocannabinoid system. And so CB1 receptors and THC receptors are actually part of that. So anandamide actually fits into those receptors. So you can have that same experience of like being high and having an orgasm. A lot of times they may feel very similar, and that is because of the anandamide neurotransmitter. And one of the things that's really interesting in the research is that when males orgasm, they have a much, much higher release of the neurotransmitter GABA, which is responsible for sleep. So a lot of males may feel like they just want to crash out after an orgasm. You can thank GABA for that. But females don't. It's not that they don't get any release of GABA, it's just not nearly as much as what happens in males. And it has a bit to do with the way the different hormones and it all plays together, right? And so that leads me to the hormones, right? So there's also a release of other hormones. Oop, I just realized one of our people got out and came back in. All right, so that brings us to the hormones, right? So we just talked about the neurotransmitters. So just real quick, neurotransmitters are the chemicals that are going on in the brain. They then kind of tell the rest of the body what to do, and then the hormones are how the rest of the body does everything, right? So the brain releases these different neurotransmitters, and then that causes these different hormones to be created, and then those different hormones do different things. So one of the big ones that is released at the time of orgasm is oxytocin. There's, a whole bunch of different sociological reasons, why we probably evolved to be able to have this oxytocin release. But it is the one that's responsible for the hormone that people call it like the love hormone because it helps with bonding. But it does actually, create an overall sense of relaxation in your body. It's, really you can see why we have that hormone being released and why the people who don't have oxytocin release probably did not survive because they didn't, want to bond with their partners and reproduce, right? So they died out. And so those of us that are left, we get to have oxytocin. We also have a release of prolactin, and this has an impact on your immune system. So it actually turns down the immune system. So a lot of times people think like, oh, I want to have like my immune system, like, I need my immune system to be better. I need my immune system to be better. And really what's the majority of time, what's actually happening is we're stressed out and we have an overworked immune system. So remember, if you were here on Tuesday and you learned all about how the immune system gets, activated when you're stressed, the good thing about having an orgasm, it actually kind of turns that off. So we actually want that because like we're not supposed to be fighting stuff all the time. We need to have this, a balance, right? Everything is, it's all about a balance in our body, like an in and out, the parasympathetic and sympathetic, right? Gas break, right? So cool thing about orgasms is it actually turns that down so that way our immune system can have a break so it can actually function better later. And so prolactin is the hormone that helps with that. And then the DHEA is probably like, the oxytocin helps you feel good and the bonding, but the DHEA is probably like, you know, uh, ego for my ego is my favorite one, because this actually helps increase estrogen. So the more you have estrogen, like the more you want to have sex. So like one of the best ways to actually jumpstart your libido is actually to have sex. Like even if you don't want to, I mean, as long as you're not like in pain and like all, I'm not saying like don't have sex if you don't want to have sex, but if you want to be like in your mind you want to be having sex, right, but your body isn't like kind of following along yet, one of the easiest ways to actually start that is actually to engage in having sex and bring yourself to orgasm, and so that way you'll want to have more sex. But then the ego part is that the DHEA actually helps with your skin texture, and I swear I did not have a lot of sex when I was married, sadly, right? And then after I was married, started having a lot of sex. And I swear I look younger now than I did, years ago. And I swear it's because of all the orgasms I have now. So go have if you want to look young and youthful, go have lots of orgasms. And it also actually is really good for the brain, and it helps protect against neurotoxins. So orgasms really are like one of the most beneficial things that you can do for your body. It helps regulate your immune system. Like if you're too stressed out and it's overworked, it helps improve your skin. It helps you regulate your hormones, increasing that estrogen or testosterone for males too. Um, and then it also helps protect your brain and Alzheimer's, depression, uh, anxiety, ADHD, like all of these have a lot of ties with like the neurotoxins in our brain. And so like we want to be able to have more DHEA, and orgasms are like the quickest way to get that boost of DHEA. And then we also have the vasopressin, which helps us regulate our circadian rhythm. So it helps you be able to sleep better. Like what's what's better than that? Like something that's free and it feels good and it helps you be healthier, right? Like orgasms are amazing. And so then that leads us to brain waves. I kind of want to talk a little bit what's happening in the brain as far as the waves. So brainwave, so we were talking about the biology, like the neurobiology of it. This is actually getting more into like the energetics, like energy that's going on through there. There's different energetic systems. The nervous system in general is like an electrical system. Your fascia is an electromagnetic. Your muscles also are in the electromagnetic, but there's all these different brain waves that affect those different systems. And so it's just really cool. Like to me, I think it's really cool. So when you are having an orgasm, you have delta waves, theta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, and gamma waves. Yes, you have them all. There is a coherence that happens in your body at the point of orgasm that does not happen at any other time. Like so far, at least that scientists have found. There is, if you want to help get your brain patterns like regulated and uh, to like working together, orgasms are one of the best ways to do that. A lot of like if you suffer from PTSD or CPTSD, you're going to have like theta wave uh, issues, and orgasms can help regulate the theta waves. If you're in high beta a lot, like ADHD, the orgasms can help regulate your beta waves. Like orgasms are like amazing. Like there's a reason I'm an orgasm coach, right? So the kind of the different uh, brain waves do different things. And so the delta is like that really, really deep sleep and like deep meditation. Then you have your theta waves, which is like kind of when you're learning to. So uh, you'll get an intuition kind of is in that theta and it's in that twilight state. But it's also like also when you're awake too. Uh, theta waves and delta waves are really interesting because they're really important to that we have them good. They're also the reason why PTSD is an issue is because you kind of get stuck in them. But so we want to be able to move in and out of theta. Theta is not, you should not be like living in theta and delta. It's not good for you. You want to have that process. And then you have alpha. And then alpha is like that flow state. It's like when you're resting, it's like you're feeling good. And this is really where the most like mind body integration practices try to get you into is in that alpha, more of an alpha state. And just like everything else, like with the brain, like you're not in one at all times, right? And so with all of these different areas, the theta, alpha, beta, gamma, they are actually happening in different areas of the brain. So it's not like all the areas are having all these brain waves, right? So like the different parts are doing different things. So um, it's, that could be just like a whole entire 2-hour class, just if you wanted to learn that. But it is really interesting to see like what is happening there. And then the beta, which is like problem solving, decisions, and judgment. They do actually, the areas that are typically stuck in more of a beta wave have a tendency to reduce, and then other areas that are not, don't go into that beta wave, have a tendency to go in during orgasm. And then we also have the gamma waves, which is this like this expanded consciousness. And it's not a surprise that that area of the brain where the out of body experience, that's like the high gamma at that point. So it's like that's the gamma in that area of the brain being activated is what makes you feel like, woo. So that's the cool part. So orgasms are really awesome and amazing. And then after orgasm, you have resolution, provided that you're not having multiple orgasms as a female. If males ejaculate, they go into resolution. If males don't ejaculate, so like say they're having a prostate orgasm, they can have multiple orgasms through prostate. They do not. Just like the female can have multiple orgasms. It is the process of the ejaculation um, that usually causes that GABA release. Remember, that makes them sleepy. Remember, that like it's all biologically there, and then that process starts the resolution phase because they need to be able to build up semen again. And so the resolution is returning to a resting state. There's going to be serotonin. During the whole process of orgasm, there's dopamine is required for orgasm. And then after the dopamine, the serotonin is there because dopamine and serotonin have this like balance, like they have like a little relationship going on. And so they kind of like have each other's backs, right? So like if there's a lot of dopamine, then there will be serotonin later. It just and sometimes if there's too much dopamine, the serotonin production goes low. They try to balance each other out, and depending on what's going on, it can get a little bit tricky there. But if there's too like really heightened states and lots of dopamine production during that time, the serotonin is not getting produced, and the serotonin and dopamine have different half-lives, meaning how it leaves your body and how long it takes and the production schedules. So it can take longer for your serotonin to get replenished than it does for your dopamine. So that can lead to that experience of subdrop, which I will talk about on in my other classes, like in my BDSM classes, I talk a bit about subdrop a lot. And then yeah, so that's resolution. Right. And then that's kind of that's the end of the of everything there. Um does anyone have any questions, comments? I would love to get any feedback, any ahas. Anyone want to come on and say anything? Anyone? Anyone?
I am a sex coach, so I deal a lot with like orgasms and stuff, and I've never had such like an in-depth breakdown of the scientific like neurobiology, what parts of your brain are working with nerves to what areas. So I'm really excited to like put those into some more of my practices of like when I'm giving like activities for them to do, be like, hey, work on triggering this nerve by touching these areas or doing different things like that. So I'm really excited to kind of like re-go over all my notes and then like
Yay.
change some things around.
Woohoo! That's awesome. Yeah, I know like all the research is out there. It's just uh, that's one of the reasons I put together this whole series is trying to put all of this stuff together because it's all disparate and it's hard to have it all in one place. So now you have it all in one place. But thank you for giving me your feedback. That makes me feel feel happy. Yeah. Thank you so much for this informative presentation. Um, oh yes, I know the recording on Tuesday. So I have to redo the class. I haven't decided if I'm going to redo the class live or if I'm just going to do it on my own. I'm actually going away. I'm leaving on Sunday and I'm going to be gone for over a week and I will not have my computer or anything. I'm not working. So I am going to get it together. I doubt I can get it together before I go, but I am going to do it again because this is information. Like part of the reason I'm doing this is because my clients, um, I want them to be able to watch this information, like watch these videos, these classes first, so then we can work more deeply together. So I will be getting that stress and trauma class back out again because I need it. So I'm so bummed. I was heartbroken. I was all excited because I was having some tech issues because the new computer thing. I'm so thankful that at least I was able to get a new computer in time and get everything set up to be able to do the presentation. But I had an audio issue, so my entire recording has no audio. But the people who attended class got to hear it. So I will send out an email. I did send out an email saying I'm going to be recorded. So keep an eye out for my emails from me. I will let you know when that is available and when I do it again. So I'm probably, as I said, I may or may not do it live. All right. Any other questions or comments or anything? Anybody? All right. I do, I did test. The audio should have been recorded on this one, so it will be available to come back up. If you guys do have any more questions or thoughts or just feedback or anything, I would love to hear from you guys. But otherwise, I left this extra time, the hour and a half for any questions, but hopefully I explained everything really well so you guys understand it all. All right. So thank you if there's nothing else. All right. Bye, everybody.